The story of the 12 apostles is not just a list of names. It's a journey, a fire ignited in their hearts by Jesus, carried to the ends of the earth, often at the cost of their lives. In part one, we witness the deaths of Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the closest disciples, the ones who saw glory on the mountain and agony in the garden. In part two, we followed Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, and Philip, men whose names are often overlooked, yet whose sacrifices shape the foundation of the church. And now, the final part. Four apostles we know the least about. They wrote no gospels. Their stories are brief, their names rarely celebrated, but in that silence lies a hidden power. Simon the Zealot, once a political rebel, now a servant of peace. Jude Thaddeus, the one who asked Jesus a question, then lived a life of quiet answers. Matthias, chosen by God to restore the 12. And James the Less, one of the 12, a quiet but faithful witness who, according to tradition, was killed near the temple for his unwavering devotion to Christ. This is the end of their earthly journey, but their names are written forever, because behind each name is blood, faith, and a love stronger than death. James, the son of Alphaeus, often called James the Less, is one of the most mysterious apostles of the 12. His name appears only in the apostolic lists of the Gospels. He does not speak. He performs no recorded miracles. He's not among the inner circle, and yet Jesus chose him, and he followed. There is a quiet strength in James. He may have walked in the shadows, but his loyalty was not lesser. He reminds us of the countless Christians throughout history who lived faithfully without fame, who served Christ not on platforms, but in silence. Early church tradition holds that James was martyred in Jerusalem, thrown from the temple's pinnacle, and then stoned to death. But here we must pause and clarify. That same description, thrown from the temple and then beaten, is often ascribed to a different James. James, the brother of Jesus, the author of the Epistle of James, and leader of the Jerusalem church. According to the Jewish historian Josephus and later Eusebius, this James was hurled from the temple and beaten with a club when he survived the fall. Even his enemies admired his piety. So most likely, that account refers to the Lord's brother, not the apostle James, son of Alphaeus. As for the apostle James the Less, we simply do not know the details. Yet many early sources agree. He too died a martyr's death, and the traditions may have merged, their stories tangled together. Two faithful men named James, both dying for their faith, both in Jerusalem. What matters most is not which roof they fell from, but the cross they carried in their hearts. James the Less, quiet, faithful, and forgotten by men, was not forgotten by God. Simon the Zealot, one of the most mysterious disciples of Jesus. The Gospels tell us only one thing about him. He was a zealot. That word said everything. Zealots were Jewish revolutionaries, fiercely opposed to Roman occupation. Perhaps Simon once dreamed of freedom through force, but then he met Jesus, and everything changed. Christ didn't call him to take up arms, but to take up a cross. Simon laid down his former loyalties and followed the Messiah. He became one of the 12. After Pentecost, tradition says he traveled far, through North Africa, possibly even to Britain, bringing the gospel to lands deep in pagan darkness. Some say he stood before Druids with nothing but truth and courage. His final mission took him to Persia. There, surrounded by fire worshippers and hostile kings, Simon was killed for his faith. Some say he was sawn in half. Others, that he was hacked to death. Either way, he died not as a zealot of war, but a zealot of grace. Simon's life is a portrait of passion transformed by love. His name may be forgotten in the world, but his fire still burns in eternity. Jude, also called Thaddeus, is one of the least known of the 12 apostles, but that doesn't make his story less important. In fact, it might make it even more powerful. In the Gospel of John, we hear him only once. He asked Jesus, "Lord, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world?" Just one question, but a revealing one. A question of faith, of yearning, of a heart seeking understanding. That is the voice of a disciple, not craving glory but truth. He was known as Thaddeus to distinguish him from Judas Iscariot. A different name, but the same mission, to follow Christ to the end. After the resurrection, Jude didn't stay in familiar places. He went where others wouldn't, to regions steeped in paganism, to cities ruled by ancient fear. He preached first in Judea, then in Mesopotamia, and finally in Persia. There among fire worshippers and distant kings, he boldly proclaimed the gospel. He wasn't the loudest apostle, he wasn't the most famous, but his quiet endurance speaks louder than any sermon. His steps crossed deserts, his words pierced silence, his presence brought hope where there was none, and in Persia his journey ended. According to tradition, he was pierced by arrows, possibly while preaching. Perhaps he saw them coming, perhaps he didn't, but he did not flee. He stood. Maybe his last words were a prayer. Maybe his last thought was peace. Either way, heaven received him, not as a forgotten name, but as a faithful son. Jude Thaddeus is a picture of holy obscurity. The world may not remember him, but God does. And in that, there is greatness. Matthias, a name rarely mentioned, a voice never recorded in Scripture. Yet this man became part of the most important circle in history, the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Not by ambition, not by inheritance, but by divine appointment. After Christ ascended to heaven and the early believers gathered to pray and wait, Peter stood among them and said, "Let another take the place of Judas." The community knew that the 12 had to be complete, a symbol of Israel, a foundation for the church. They found two men who had walked with Jesus from the beginning, Joseph, Barsabbas, and Matthias. These were not newcomers. They had witnessed everything from John's baptism to the ascension. And the disciples didn't vote. They prayed, "Lord, you who know every heart, show us whom you have chosen." And the lot fell on Matthias. This was not luck. This was heaven's hand. Matthias joined the circle, not as a celebrity, but as a witness. Tradition says he preached first in Judea and then far beyond, to the peoples of the Caucasus, perhaps even to Ethiopia. He walked unknown paths, spoke to unfamiliar peoples, carried the gospel into spiritual wildernesses. He was not famous, he was not loud, but he was faithful. And like so many of the 12, he sealed his testimony with blood. Tradition tells us that he was beheaded, perhaps in the land of Georgia or among ancient tribes in North Africa, a quiet martyr, a servant to the end. Matthias is a reminder that you don't need fame to be chosen. You just need to be faithful. Heaven sees what the world ignores, and those who follow in silence may shine brightest in eternity. Why are we telling these stories? Why remember how the apostles died? Because no one dies for a lie, knowing it's a lie. These men didn't just believe. They saw the risen one. They walked with him, touched his wounds, heard his voice after the grave. And they gave their lives, not for an idea, not for tradition, but for the living Christ. Their courage wasn't natural. It came from certainty that death is not the end, and that truth is stronger than fear. They passed this faith forward, and we are here 2,000 years later because they didn't stay silent and they didn't turn back. Their blood wasn't a tragedy, it was seed, the seed of a church that spread across the earth. But this is not just about the past. This is about you. Do you believe enough to live this truth? We're not all called to die for Christ, but we are all called to live for Him. Maybe this is your moment to pause, to believe for real, and maybe it's to pray, Lord, strengthen my faith. Make me faithful like they were. Let my life bear witness to you.